Today we will be going over the reviewing some parts of chapter 1, and then we will also be going into chapter 2 for writing equations. And our review for today are functions and box functions.
As you guys remember from last video, functions are basically boxes which take in an input and they output a certain number. And the function itself just tells you how the input number is transformed to get the output number. So using this information, we can kind of map out what these functions do and then get an output number from a certain input. So let's look at this function right here. F of x is equal to negative 2x plus 4. And let's see what this function equals when x equals 2. So x equals 2 is kind of fed into the function. When we actually solve it, we get negative 2 times 2, which is our x. So we replace x with 2 and then plus 4. And this will be 0. Now let's look at the second one. So same thing, just different function. This time the function is absolute value of x minus 2. So all we have to do really is we have to replace x with negative 6, which is what we're feeding into the function. So absolute value of negative 6 minus 2, which is equal to absolute value of negative 8. And as some of you may know, when you take an absolute value of a number, you basically make that number positive if it's not already positive. So for negative 8, it just becomes 8. So that's the answer for the second question. So now let's look at our third example. So we do the same thing here. We replace x with 9 and see what the function is at 9. So our function is root x plus 1, so it's root 9 plus 1. Root 9 is 3 because 3 times 3 is 9, and then plus 1 is just 4. So this equals to 4. And for our last question, we do x equals 17, and it's x squared. So we replace that with 17 squared to see what the function is at 17. And this is equal to, let's do some multiplication. So 9 carry the 4, 11, and then 17. This is equal to 289, and that's our answer.
So the next thing we're going to go over are exponent laws and PEMDAS. And first thing is exponent laws. So we have, first exponent law is anything to the power of 0 equals 1. The second law is, so x to the power of a number times x to the power of another number is x to the power of the sum of those powers. And then x to the a divided by x to the b equals x to the difference between a and b. And then x to the negative n equals 1 over x to the n, and then x to the power of b, and then the whole thing to the power of a is x to the power of a times b. And okay, now we're going to go over some examples. And first one we have is 2xy to the power of 3 times 5x squared times y to the power of 4. So in this case, we first want to rearrange the numbers and the variables so that we can group them up. So it's group them up into 2 times 5 times x squared times y cubed times y to the 4. And from here, we can clearly see the different groups we have laid out. And we know that 2 times 5 is 10 times. And based on this law, we can find that x times x squared is x cubed. And then y times x cubed times y to the power of 4th is the same thing as y to the power of 7. And that will be your final answer. And the next one. So we have 14 times x squared times y to the power of 12 divided by 7 times x to the 5th times y to the 7th. So same thing like what we did in the first one. We want to split the numbers and variables up into their own respective groups. So we have 14 over 7 times squared x fifth times 1 12 y 7th. And using the quotient law, we can find that. So 14 divided by 7 is 2, and then x squared over x to the 5th is x to the negative 3rd, so x negative cubed, and then y to the power to the 12th power over y to the 7th power is y to the 5th power. And using the negative exponent rule, we know that this, in the end, our final answer will be, because x to the negative third is 1 over x cubed. And then our final example, 3x squared times y to the fourth, and then everything to the third. So we have, using the last power rule we have here, we have 3 cubed times x squared cubed times y fourth cubed. And using the same idea, we get 27 times x to the 2 times 3, 6 times y to the 4 times 3, which is 12. So our final answer will be 27 times x to the 6 times y to the 12.
So PEMDAS is the order of operations in math. And so first, so when you're simplifying an expression or equation, you might think in which order do I go? And typically it's like this. When there are parentheses, you simplify the part of the expression within that parentheses first. And then after that, if there's an exponent, then you simplify the exponent, and then multiplication or division, you simplify those next. And then you can add and subtract the numbers. So for example here, I made a little expression, 2 plus 4 parentheses minus 6 times 3 plus 7 squared. And so following the PEMDAS order, you do 2 plus 4 first, so 6. And then you do the exponent next, so 7 squared, which is 49. And then you do the multiplication, so that's 6 times 3, which is 18. And then you're free to add and subtract. And typically you would go from the leftmost, from the leftmost to the right. So 6 minus 18 and 49 minus 12. Okay, so here's another example. 3 squared plus 4 minus 7 times 2. And so parentheses first, and within the parentheses, there's its own sort of order because there's an exponent. So exponent first within the parentheses, so 9 plus 4. And since parentheses first, 9 plus 4 with 13. And then there's no exponents, but there is a multiplication part right here. So you multiply that and that turns into 14. And then there's nothing else left, so you just subtract it and you get -1.
Okay, now let's go back to linear functions. Specifically, how do we find out what the linear function is given 2 points? So basically 2 input-output pairs. So if we remember from last video, one of the ways we can write a linear function is y equals mx plus b, where m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. So the value of the line when we plug in 0 for x, because if we plug in 0 for x, this part becomes 0, so y just becomes b. So that's why b is the y-intercept. And specifically from 2 points, we can get rise over run. And we can see this from here. If we have 2 random points, here and here, there will be a rise and a run from those points. And if you look here, the rise is their difference in their y-coordinates, and the run is difference in their x-coordinates. And from this, we can derive a formula, which is this. y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 is our slope, so this equals m. So right away, we can find m. So let's pick 2 points at random, maybe 2, 0, and maybe 4, 5. So if we remember, this is the y-coordinate, this is the x-coordinate. So let's just say this is the first one, this is the second one. The order doesn't matter. So 5 minus 0, y1 minus y2 over 4 minus 2. So difference in y over difference in x, rise over run, is equal to 5 over 2. So that's our slope. So now we have m in the equation. We know what if the equation is y equals mx plus b, we know that it's y equals 5 over 2x plus b. However, we have to find b. And what we can do is we can use one of these points and solve for b, because this equation gives us how to transform x into y. If we know what one of the x's is, and we know if what the y for that x should be, we can find out what b is. So let's just plug in, let's do 2, 0, because those numbers seem smaller. So y is 0, so we can write 0 is equal to 5 over 2x, x is 2. So 5 over 2 times 2, and then plus b, because we don't know what b is. And from this, let me scroll down a bit. From this, we can simplify. So 0 is equal to 5 over 2 times 2 is just 5 plus b. So b is equal to -5. And once we have m and b, we can just write the equation. So y is equal to 5 over 2x minus 5. And specifically for finding the equation of a line, this process will always be the same, given 2 points. Use the difference in y over difference in x to find the slope. Write the equation with the slope and then plug in one of the points for x and y to find b. We can try doing that again with another set of points to see that it does work. So let's go here. So let's say our points are, let's do 7, 1, and 1, 3. So right away, difference in x over difference in y over difference in x. So difference in y is 3 minus 1. So let's say this is the first point, this is the second point. So instead it would be 1 minus 3 over 7 minus 1 for our slope. This is just negative 2 over 6, which can be simplified to negative 1 over 3. So this is m. And now we can plug this into our equation. So y equals negative 1/3 x plus some value b. And again, we can use any point, y and x, to find b. So let's use 1 and 3. So y is equal to negative 1/3 times 1 plus b. So y is 1 in this case. So let me replace y with 1. Or not 1, actually, y is actually 3. So 3 is equal to negative 1/3. So let's simplify. 3 is equal to negative 1/3 times 1 is just negative 1/3 plus b. b is equal to 3 and 1/3. And now we can write the equation. The equation is y equals negative 1/3 x plus 3 and 1/3. And so that is how we find the slope, find the equation for a linear function knowing its 2 points.